Hello, welcome to our webinar for today. Happy New Year to everyone. I hope you're all doing very well. Wishing you a very happy New Year. Hope the month is off to a good start. Today we will be presenting on Whoops, They Did It Again, reviewing some of the most common mistakes that we see in place marketing. We'll tackle 6 of the most relevant ones today based on what we're seeing in the industry and considering how marketing is changing. We'll move quite fast on this, but I'm hoping at least a couple of these resonate with each and every one of you based on where you are and what you're going through and what you're experiencing with your own place brand, whether that is holistic or one-off FDI, maybe talent, maybe something else as well. And so we will dive in. Before we do so, just an introduction for those of you who we may not have met yet. I am Steve Duncan, Managing Director of C Studios. I have more than 20 years of experience in the place marketing industry in New York, in Denver. Now I am based in Amsterdam and have worked with economic development organizations across the globe, pretty much on every continent. For C Studios, if you're wondering who we are the marketing communications agency for places. We are based in Amsterdam. We're a majority-owned partner of DCI, who you may have heard of, the longtime leader in place marketing out of the US. At C Studios, we use our expertise in inward investment, talent attraction, and trade promotion to help with brand positioning, international strategy, and digital marketing implementation. And I see a few familiar names on the call of people that we've worked with before, so happy to have you join us. With that introduction, let's dive in. What are 6 of the most common mistakes that we are seeing in international place marketing? First up is USP confusion. Audiences are judging whether they are on the right website or looking at the right LinkedIn channel within about the first 3 seconds of interacting with your brand. And so are you selling the right message to your audience? What we see a lot is that, in particular in FDI, this happens in trade promotion as well, and sometimes even in the meeting space, we're actually selling the organization, not the place. And that can be a bit confusing to audiences. There are a few reasons why this happens, but they are there for the uniqueness of the region, not the uniqueness of the IPA, the EDO, the place brand, whatever you choose to call it. So there are some different scenarios involved that may have some exceptions to this. For example, if you have a heavy stakeholder audience, if you have a lot of services for local startups, obviously some of your audience is more local. But if your primary audience is international, or in the US, if it's other domestic locations, it is the place that really matters. And so we have a framework that we walk clients through that we love to use internally as well to guide our own thinking on this. And it comes from Build Your Own Story Brand. It's a great book. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend. It's a very quick read. We've talked about it on some of our previous webinars. But the story brand concept comes down to 7 elements of any story, and they are: a character has a problem, meets a guide who gives them a plan, calls them to action, that helps avoid failure, and ends in success. These are the 7 elements of basically any movie that you would ever see. The frequent one that he uses in the book is Star Wars, which many of us internationally know, where everyone thinks that themselves they're Luke Skywalker, and actually it is often our clients that are the Luke Skywalker. We are more the Ben Kenobi, if I may borrow from the Star Wars analogy. So putting this into an economic development context and relating it to this USP confusion that we're talking about, we would say the customer is the hero. The villain is that problem, the customer problem that they're having. The guide is the EDO, the organization, but we're still not yet talking about that. The people coming to our websites, interacting on our social media, they're there for the place's value proposition. This is why they're there. They are trying to figure out how are you a solution to their problem. This is the plan that they're looking for. We're going to call them to action, so the customers must always be called. And we want to make sure that through that experience, they understand what's at stake if they don't take action. And then it's the transformation that takes place that we're also selling. This is what your website, your marketing should be talking about, is what does that transformation look like? This is why it's great to use case studies, and but hopefully this framework helps a little bit. What we see a lot is someone comes to the website and you're automatically talking about your organization. And if your place is not leading front and center, you're going to lose your audience quite quickly. And so whether it is talent or businesses that are your main audience, when it comes to international marketing, it's really important that you lead with the place first. We like to say, who are you? What are you about? What value do you provide companies? Those are great things to lead with before you get to eventually your organization. So who is doing this well? Montreal International is actually doing this quite well themselves. You see here, just as an example, they have a homepage that leads with Montreal and the value, talent, and technology to move forward together. They have very high up on their website 6 reasons companies are settling up in Montreal. This leads with what are other companies doing. So Montreal is the guide here. They're showing the the path to transformation, strategic location, skilled talents, cost advantages. And then later on, they do have examples of companies that would be that transformation story that they're sharing. And then eventually, yes, there is a place for you to incorporate what services your organization provides. And that's well done here as well. Recruit your international talent with us. It's something very tangible and specific that Montreal provides. But they start with the place and then they get to where the organization can help that company land in that place as the guide, as the Ben Kenobi. So this is number one in terms of sometimes, and listen, this is all over the place. Some of you do this quite well. Some others, we highly recommend that this is something you take a fresh look at and understand that people are there for the place first and foremost. And I should say, if you have any questions at any time, feel free to write anything in the Q&A, in the chat. Happy to answer those as they come in and as we go along. So more than happy to take questions along the way. All right, moving on. Number 2. One key question to ask as a part of this is, are we designing the journey for us, or are we designing it for the people that journey is ultimately supposed to serve? What we see here is an overthinking of the user journey. This question of who are we designing this journey for sometimes can seem quite obvious, but time and again, it shows up as becoming more complicated than maybe what we set out at the very beginning to design. We need to focus on how people could potentially interact with our place brand, with our organization's content, and build the journey considering all those potential contingencies. Sometimes we see a journey being designed, and I'll run you through what that looks like here in a second. We see a journey being designed, and it's with one path and one path only in mind. And what we risk doing by taking that approach is missing all the other ways that people could potentially interact with our organization. So here is a basic, very, very basic lead journey, whether that again is talent or it's executives. It's basically 4 steps, and we see this a lot. And this is a sample. You have an awareness ad, you drive to a landing page, then you want to retarget that person with a consideration ad, and you ultimately want them to convert. That sounds nice, clean, neat. I would love it if things worked this way all the time, but oftentimes they're very messy. And so when you think about it, that awareness ad is being supplemented by maybe somebody sees it and they actually don't click on the ad, but they go to search and they come to your website that way. Or they see a post on social media, they come that way. Maybe somebody has sees your ad, forwards it to somebody they think might be more interested, and that would be what we call dark social, basically another way to say word of mouth. And somebody else is actually coming through to your landing page. They get to maybe your content, whether it's through your ad or elsewhere, and they do some other exploring, and they end up, rather than maybe spending time on your landing page, spending time on cost of living, sector information, immigration information, if it's a talent that's looking to relocate, they're automatically off of your predetermined lead set. And this is where we see a lot of navigation issues. Somebody has come through an alternative path and can't find the information that they are looking for. So most often we see sector details really hard to find because somebody planned, the marketing person planned on that person coming through the landing page, and then we'll direct them to those sector pages. But to go to the website through organic search, it's very hard to find those sector pages, and maybe that's what that person wants. By over-engineering the journey, we've automatically eliminated ourselves inadvertently from the process because we are trying to force this pathway to happen when it's not necessarily happening. And then maybe that person doesn't get hit by the consideration ad or the retargeting ad, but they go offline. They ask a friend or they read an article, and then they're coming back to a different page on your website. Are you making it easy for them to find, again, the information that they need through good navigation structure, appropriate content, making sure you actually have the content that they are looking for? A lot of times it's just completely missing. They want taxes and incentives information. They want major employers. And that page doesn't exist because we haven't thought about it through all these potential scenarios where they may come through. And so they may experience your place brand by not even clicking on your ad, or maybe they do, but not hitting your landing page, not getting that retargeting message, and they may still want to or be a potential conversion. Do we have the user journey set up this way? Do we have all these contingencies accounted for as a part of our user journeys? Oftentimes we see that this is not the case. We see it as one journey only, and we don't consider all those. Why is this important? Because the decision process is very messy. This is just a sample that we've thrown together from a past report, a white paper that we've done on how the user journey is changing. Don't expect anyone to read all of this, but you can see the various complications that take place as a part of a journey. Sometimes the decision gets stalled, or they have to go back to the beginning before they then loop around again. And sometimes the decision selection, the site location, or if you're a talent, the place that you end up wanting to move ends up being almost sometimes random, or it's informed by something very early in the journey, but these are complex journeys. And so to have just one pathway that we're designing through this all is limiting the potential of our marketing campaigns. So thinking more broadly is the ultimate goal that we're aiming for here, that we are certainly being intentional with how we want people to interact with our place brand, but also being resilient in the sense that if they don't follow that exact path, do we have an alternative for them? Do we make it easy for them to find the information that they need? All right, that is number 2. Number 3, all features, no benefits. This one is pretty chronic in our industry, I must say. And there's a reason why. We're so focused on the places that we love that we forget that other people don't always have that same passion for these places the same way that we do. Our job is to convince them, certainly, that they should give our place another look, that we should continue on in that journey that they're on. But that's not necessarily done by saying how great we are or how much we love our place. It's done by showing them that we have value for them and that we're solving a problem, that we are providing that transformation state that they desire to be in. And so we see this a lot where we're writing to promote and not to problem solve. So let's just take these two examples here. On the left, we have what we typically see. This is just a sample. I didn't borrow this from anything. To be honest, I wrote it from AI based on just giving it the instructions of what we typically see. And so we have this headline and these two paragraphs that maybe ground the user in what this location is like. And then on the right is perhaps an alternative way to approach this, just for illustrative purposes. On the left, you see Utopia is. The region is. Utopia continues to. Utopia also offers. The region features. Utopia stands out. Everything is about the region. Everything is about that place, and the messages all start with that place. When we go on to the content of some of our clients at times, this is what we see. It almost jumps out at us, just as the letters and the words on here are jumping out at you with a different color. It just becomes very apparent because there is this, every sentence, every paragraph starts with that location and what they are or what they have. Instead, we have this alternative on the right that is very audience centric. It starts with what their needs are, what their questions are likely to be, what their problems are. Commutes are predictable. Commutes, we all hate commutes. We all hate long commutes. Career options here are broad. So this is obviously a talent example for people who want solid career momentum without giving up time, space, or sanity. That's a real sentiment and emotion and feeling that people are having right now. By leading with that, then we can say utopia is an easy place to picture yourself settling. So this difference in the copywriting is something that we see a lot of locations struggle with on their website, in their social media posts. You know, it's the same symptom where every social media post starts with the name of the community instead of starting with some sort of problem or value driven conversation. A great example of how this is done well, I highly recommend you go to A State of Denmark. It's a campaign by Copenhagen Capacity where it is focused on talent attraction, but it has great lessons for anyone, regardless of what side of the industry you're on. They have audience-focused questions or copy, I should say, real questions that audiences would have. It's consumer-driven. It's all about what's in it for the audience and not necessarily what's in it for Copenhagen. And hey, if you can mix both of those, great, but it starts with the audience first. And so the whole website really does this quite well. Their social media echoes this as well. And it's one reason why they've won a bunch of awards. It really starts with consumers first and connects with their needs, their emotions, their pain points before it introduces how Copenhagen can solve those. So this is, again, something that is quite chronic in the industry. We start a lot with ourselves, and we really need to shift to that audience first mode. Number 4, new versus unknown. For a world that doesn't love change very much, place marketers certainly love to change quite often. And sometimes we do it too often. Sometimes we see that, the place brand is just changed too many times, or there's confusion on what the place brand versus a campaign is. And that can really have a detrimental effect on how long lasting and how effective the brand is communicating the ultimate message. If you look at some of these examples that I'll give you here, we have New Zealand, we have India, and we have Amsterdam. All 3 of these were created in the 2000s. All 3 of these are currently the place brand for these locations. They're still in existence today. They've gone through some minor changes, maybe some slight visual updates, some obviously evolution to the messaging, but the brand mark and the values that they stand for have been very, very consistent over time. And as we like to say, consistency over intensity every time. It's important to be consistent. And so the challenge here is a lot of times places are changing their message all the time, and it just doesn't even have a chance to settle in. It settles in locally, and local audiences maybe even get exhausted by it. But for an international, or again in the US, even going outside your own state, it's really important that you have that consistent message, because your external audiences are not seeing this every day like your local audiences are, and it makes a big difference when you're able to stay consistent over time. And so I mentioned there's sometimes a confusion between the brand and the campaign, and apologies if this is 101 to some of you, but I think it's important to walk through the distinctions here of what we're talking about, and these two components, what the differences truly are. So you have a brand and a campaign. They often get confused. The brand is all about what is that core idea or unique positioning. It's about brand values. It's about a promise that you're making. And yes, sometimes you can go through some evolutions of this. So we're not saying what it is on day one has to be what it is on day 1,000 or 10,000. For example, Estonia recently had, I think it was 5 brand values, and when Russia invaded Ukraine, they added a 6th, which was about democracy and trying to draw a distinction between their past and making sure everyone knew what side they were on, and that was really important to communicate as a brand value evolution. Excellent job, and again, these should not be static. They should be fundamental, though. This is your long-term platform. You want to enhance and involve, but you also want to keep that central idea. A campaign is more time-bound. So this is where you have a clear objective, you have a defined target audience, there's maybe a singular focus theme that it should speak to the brand, but it is a bit more agile to that brand. So this is your short-term activation. And I would argue that a lot of times campaigns are even changed a bit too often. We run them for 3 months and then it's on to something new. Campaigns can also have some longevity. Maybe it's a year or 2 years. That's perfectly fine. There's no problem with that, but there's definitely a difference between that place brand where you have those values established and they are long-term driven, versus the campaign, which is much more of that agility that you're going for. And so knowing the difference between the two is really paramount to understanding how your place is going to be perceived long-term. We get a frequent question of how long should my place brand last for? You know, I'm spending all this money to do a place brand. How long should it last for? Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Sometimes you need to refresh that. It's not to say that the place brand is forever and ever, but it should be seen as a long-term expression of the values of your community. And then the campaigns, maybe depending on the use case, it can be 3, 6 months, it can be a year, 2 years, but the campaign should ladder up to that place brand. They're not one and the same. So that distinction is really important. It's something that we see over and over again. Some folks have this dialed and really, really smart, but it is something that we see that is recurring within the industry. And again, if you have questions, please let me know. Feel free to drop them into the Q&A or the chat. Almost done here. Number 5, publishing or performing. So what we see a lot is that we are always creating new content and very seldom focusing on existing content. So we recommend a bit of a, we got my slides confused here for a moment. Some data to consider on what this looks like. why is it important that we should focus on existing content a bit more? Refreshing older content can increase organic traffic. You see some stats here. There's not one metric that defines what this looks like. It's very fluid, but tests that have been done by reputable organizations over the years continually show a great way to get more organic traffic is to focus on existing content, not new content. And as we transfer to AI, organic search is still really, really important. It's still the majority of search volume. But as we shift to AI, they're even preferring content, fresh content even more. And so it's important that we keep that in mind also, that as we go forward, fresh is going to be even more important than traditional search. So just some guidelines to consider along the way. Rather than spending 90-10 or 100-0 on new content versus old, consider a 70-30 or 60-40 split. You're still focusing on new content, but you're also making sure that you are concentrating on old content. And that doesn't mean updating old blogs only or press releases, but also the core pages. We see it a lot where the core content pages that make up the navigation structure of a website are actually woefully out of date by 2 years, 3 years, possibly more. So making sure that you're looking at all of the content holistically and updating those in addition to creating some of the new stuff. And updating might mean taking away some of the old stuff as well. So don't hesitate to get rid of old blogs, old press releases, old success stories that are no longer relevant. We've also seen some numbers similar to those stats I shared with you. We've also seen some numbers where removing content can concentrate the search activity on the higher value pages as well. So keep that in mind as you are planning your content for 2026. And then finally, defending rather than reframing. When we go into a community, we ask people for their reflections and their observations about their own community. Tell us what makes this place special. Tell us what makes this place unique. And what we see a lot is people go immediately to what are the misperceptions that outsiders have, and here's how we're going to defend it. We would suggest a slightly different approach on this. Instead of pushing back, we really suggest pushing forward, using those misperceptions, using what you are known for already, even if it's in a negative light, to inform how you should be viewed in a positive light. So I'll give an example here. Alberta. This is a client we've been working on. They were very well known for their natural resources. If you know Alberta well, you know it's a huge oil province in Western Canada, lots of reserves. But how could we leverage this? There's some negative connotations around this as well. So how can you leverage this? Well, it's also abundant in a lot of other resources, growth resources like land, which they have big cities with a lot of land in Alberta. That is not always true everywhere. And so that's an advantage. Human resources, highest concentration of engineers in Canada. So there are other types of resources they had. And so we wanted people to understand that it's not just the natural resources, it's these others as well. Alberta is home to big resources and bold resourcefulness. Their place brand is Big, Bold Alberta. And so again, this campaign ladders up to that. Big resources, big, bold resourcefulness. It is both full of resources, the physical things, and the resourcefulness, which is more the tangible, intangible things. And so this really became the underpinning of the Invest Alberta Resourceful campaign that laddered up to the Big, Bold Alberta place brand. Another example is Helsinki. They have the seasonal effect. You want to know what it's happening. So sometimes viewed as a negative. You go there in February and the sun barely rises. And so we looked at this, and if you really look into the data, they're one of the world's happiest nations, in part due to the fact that this mental and bodily recovery, and this is true across a lot of the Nordics, really provided by that seasonality is an advantage. And so how can you look at darkness as an asset? We suggested to them as part of their new strategy to lean in on this and host more events. host more of their special programming that they have that brings people to Helsinki for meetings for like investors, entrepreneurs. Don't just bring them there in the summer, bring them there also at this more difficult time of year and show them how great it can be and how much of an asset that darkness can be. So leaning in on some of those maybe negative and using them to lead towards something that's more positive. So defending, not reframing, is the mistake, and we would say don't push back, push forward. Use that as an opportunity, as a door opener for showing something a bit more positive and what your story is all about. So those are the 6 in review: selling your organization, not your place; overthinking the user journey; writing to promote, not to problem solve; changing the core message too often; always making new content rather than maximizing the existing content; and then focusing too much on pushing back rather than focusing on pushing forward. So those are the 6. Thank you for joining. That does conclude our fall and winter webinar series, but we will be picking up with another one this spring and as early as next month. So we'll have news coming out on that soon. Please feel free to follow us on LinkedIn and watch for that announcement. We also have all of our webinars from this fall and winter series on our YouTube channel, and they are all posted there. So if you've missed any of them, you're welcome to join us there. I'll include that link when I follow up with all of you. I'll share a copy of this deck for you, and make sure you have a copy of this presentation as well as the other webinars. With that, I wish everyone a happy start to the year. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.